Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship and looked out at the dark space around Earth. 3 months had passed since the alien probe went missing near Jupiter. The probe had been watching Earth from far away, taking pictures and sending signals back to its home world. Then one day it just stopped working and floated away into the black void of space. Jake knew the probe did not break by accident. Human ships had been following it for weeks, staying hidden in the shadows of asteroids and space debris. When the time was right, they disabled it with a special weapon that made it look like normal equipment failure. The aliens who sent the probe would think their machine simply broke down from being in space too long. Lisa Harper sat at her workstation reading the alien messages they had caught before the probe died. The messages were in a strange language, but human computers had learned to understand them over many months of careful study. The aliens called themselves Zephyrite, and they talked about Earth like it was a farm, animal ready for slaughter. The alien messages said Earth looked like an easy target. They saw humans as weak creatures who could not fight back against a real military force. The Zephyrite had been taking over planets for hundreds of years, and they always picked on worlds that seemed helpless. They would attack with huge fleets of warships, destroy the local defenses, and then take the survivors as slaves. Lisa read one message that made her hands shake with anger. The aliens were planning to kill most humans and keep only the young and strong ones for working in their mines and factories. They talked about human children like they were valuable objects to be bought and sold. Lisa had 2 young sons back on Earth, and the thought of them being taken by these creatures filled her with cold rage. Greg Collins walked into the command center deep under the mountains of Colorado. This secret base had been built over many years and hidden from everyone except the most important military leaders. The walls were covered with screens, showing information about alien movements throughout the galaxy. Greg had spent his whole life preparing for this day when Earth would finally face an enemy from the stars. Around the big table sat representatives from every nation on Earth. These people had been chosen because they could make hard decisions and keep secrets that might save the human race. They all knew that Earth had been pretending to be weak and divided, while actually building the strongest military force in known space. Amanda Wells stood up to show her report about the alien technology they had studied from the broken probe. The Zephyrite ships were big and looked scary, but they used old designs that were easy to predict. Their weapons were powerful, but slow to aim and reload. Most importantly, the aliens always fought the same way and never changed their tactics when facing different enemies. Amanda explained that the Zephyrite were like bullies who had never met anyone strong enough to fight back. They would charge straight at their targets, destroy everything they could see, and then land soldiers to clean up what was left. This worked fine against planets that had no real defenses, but it would be a disaster against an enemy that was ready for them. The meeting room filled with quiet tension as everyone realized what Amanda was saying. Earth had been watching and learning from alien wars for decades through hidden spy devices and long-range sensors. Human scientists had figured out how to build weapons that were better than anything the aliens used. Human soldiers had trained 4 years to fight enemies with different bodies and technologies. Greg looked around the table at the serious faces of his fellow leaders. They all knew that showing Earth's true strength too early would bring every alien empire in the galaxy down on their heads. But if they waited too long, the Zephyrite might attack with such force that even Earth's secret defenses could not stop them. The decision was made without anyone having to speak it out loud. Earth would continue to look weak and helpless until the Zephyrite committed their entire invasion fleet. Only when the aliens were close enough to be trapped would humans show their real power. It was a dangerous game, but it was the only way to make sure the victory would be complete. Jake returned to his ship with new orders. That made his heart race with excitement and fear. His crew would pretend to be a simple patrol vessel with basic weapons and weak shields. When the alien fleet arrived, they would act scared and confused like the enemy expected them to be. But hidden in the cargo holds of his ship were weapons that could crack open moon-sized asteroids. Lisa went back to her station to keep reading alien messages and sending fake human communications. She had learned to copy the way frightened people talked when their world was being invaded. Her fake distress calls would make the Zephyrite think Earth was already falling apart before they even arrived. All across the solar system, human forces began the greatest deception in military history. Advanced weapons powered down and hid behind false walls. Elite soldiers put on the uniforms of basic security guards. The most powerful warships in human space started broadcasting signals that made them look like cargo haulers and research vessels. Earth had learned the most important lesson of survival in a hostile galaxy. Sometimes the greatest strength came from appearing weak until the moment when strength was needed most. The Zephyrites thought they were coming to hunt easy prey, but they would soon discover that Earth had been preparing for predators much worse than them. The trap was being set, and soon the hunters would become the hunted. 3 weeks after the leaders made their decision, space near Earth suddenly filled with alien warships. The Zephyrite invasion fleet came out of hyperspace like angry wasps pouring from a broken nest. 200 massive ships hung in the darkness beyond the orbit of Mars, their hulls covered in weapon ports and armor plating that gleamed under the distant sun. Fleet Commander Vexed H stood in the command center of his flagship and looked at the blue-green world that would soon belong to his empire. His forearms moved across control panels while his compound eyes studied the readouts, showing him everything his sensors could detect about this new conquest. The planet looked exactly as his scouts had reported, divided, primitive, and completely unprepared for what was coming. Danny Price watched the alien fleet from his hidden base on the dark side of Earth's moon. His command bunker was buried, deep under tons of rock and metal, invisible to the most advanced sensors the Zephyrite possessed. Around him, dozens of technicians worked at computers that controlled the greatest deception operation in human history. At Danny's command, old missile sites across Earth came online and started broadcasting their locations to the alien fleet. These sites held weapons that were 50 years out of date and would be useless against modern alien armor. But to the Zephyrite they looked like the best defenses Earth could offer. The aliens would waste time and ammunition, destroying targets that did not matter, while the real weapons stayed hidden. Sarah Kim sat in her chair aboard the stealth ship Shadowhawk and listened to alien radio chatter through her headphones. The Zephyrite commanders were talking to each other in excited voices, planning how they would divide up Earth's population between different slave markets. They discussed which cities to destroy first, and which ones to keep intact for mining operations. Sarah felt sick as she translated their words, but she forced herself to keep listening. Every piece of information she gathered would help human forces know exactly when and where the aliens planned to strike. The Zephyrite were so confident they did not bother to encrypt their communications properly, making Sarah's job much easier than it should have been. The alien plan was simple and brutal. They would start by bombing major population centers from orbit to break human morale and destroy government buildings. After the initial attack, landing ships would carry soldiers to the surface to round up survivors and establish control points. Within a week, they expected Earth to be another conquered world added to their growing empire. Alex Turner climbed into his fighter and prepared for the most important acting job of his life. His squadron had been chosen to make contact with the alien scouts and lose fights in ways that would give the enemy false information about human capabilities. Alex and his pilots would have to make their defeats look real while secretly gathering data about alien weapons and tactics. Alex's fighter looked like a standard military aircraft from the outside, but hidden inside were sensors that could analyze anything the aliens shot at them. When his ship was destroyed, the data would be transmitted back to Earth in a signal burst that looked like normal equipment failure. Alex knew he probably would not survive this mission, but he also knew his sacrifice would help save billions of human lives. Patricia Lane stood in Earth's primary war room and watched displays showing the positions of forces throughout the solar system. Above her head, giant screens tracked every alien ship, while computers calculated attack patterns and predicted enemy movements. Patricia had trained for this moment her entire career, but nothing could have prepared her for the reality of seeing hostile aliens preparing to invade her home world. Hidden beneath the surface of every continent were weapons that made the alien fleet look like toys in comparison. Rail guns that could fire projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. Particle beam arrays that could boil away meters of armor in seconds. Quantum torpedo launchers that could crack planets in half. All of these weapons waited in silence, while their crews prepared for the signal to reveal Earth's true strength. The deception was working perfectly. Zephyrite scouts flew through the solar system and found exactly what they expected to find. Human patrols that ran away when confronted. Defense satellites that used outdated technology. Military bases that looked impressive from the outside but held weapons that were decades behind alien standards. Every piece of false evidence reinforced their belief that this conquest would be easy. Vexed reviewed the scout reports with growing satisfaction. His intelligence officers confirmed that Earth had no unified planetary defense force and no weapons capable of seriously damaging his warships. The humans seemed to be relying on nuclear missiles and kinetic projectiles that would barely scratch the paint on Zephyrite armor. This would be over before it really began. Deep beneath Antarctica, massive doors prepared to open for the first time in 20 years. Behind those doors waited weapon systems that drew power from the planet's core and could target objects anywhere in the solar system. The facility had been built in absolute secrecy using technology that humans had developed by studying alien wrecks and captured equipment from previous encounters with hostile species. Patricia watched the countdown timer on her command screen as it moved closer to 0 hour. When the aliens began their attack, she would wait exactly 12 minutes before giving the order to reveal Earth's hidden defenses. Those 12 minutes would let the enemy commit their entire fleet to the battle, while also making them think their initial bombardment was working as planned. The Zephyrite landing craft began launching from their carriers, loaded with soldiers who expected to face panicked civilians and lightly armed police forces. These soldiers had conquered hundreds of worlds using the same basic tactics, and they saw no reason why Earth should be any different. They carried weapons designed to stun and capture rather than kill, since live slaves were worth more than dead bodies. Alex Turner received his final orders as alien scout ships approached his position near the asteroid belt. He would engage them in what looked like a desperate attempt to protect Earth, allow his weapons to be analyzed by enemy sensors, and then let his fighter be destroyed in a way that would give the aliens confidence about their superior technology. His last act would be to transmit false information about Earth's military capabilities directly into Zephyrite computers. The trap was almost ready to spring. Across human space, thousands of soldiers, pilots, and technicians waited for the moment when they could finally drop their masks and show these alien invaders what it meant to threaten Earth. The Zephyrites thought they were hunting helpless prey, but they were about to learn that the most dangerous predators were the ones who had learned patience and planning. Soon the galaxy would discover that Earth had been preparing for this day for longer than most civilizations had existed. The first alien weapons fired at exactly 8 in the morning Greenwich time. Bright streams of plasma and chunks of metal the size of buildings fell from space onto major cities around the world. Explosions lit up the sky as buildings collapsed, and fire spread across downtown areas. To anyone watching from space, it looked like Earth was being destroyed by weapons it could not hope to resist. Vexed watched the destruction from his flagship and clicked his mandibles together in satisfaction. The human response was exactly what he had expected to see. Primitive missiles launched from ground sites and were easily shot down by his point defense systems. Radio signals from the planet's surface carried messages of panic and surrender. Some human officials were already trying to negotiate for the lives of their people. Ryan Webb sat in his command chair deep beneath the ice of Antarctica and watched his countdown timer reach 0. For 12 long minutes, he had listened to reports of human cities burning, while alien landing craft descended toward major population centers. Every second had felt like an hour, but finally the time had come to show these invaders what Earth was really capable of. Ryan pressed a single button on his control panel, and everything changed. Massive doors opened across the planet's surface, revealing weapon emplacements that had been hidden for decades. The ground itself seemed to come alive as railgun turrets rose from concealed bunkers, and particle beam arrays turned toward the sky. In less than 30 seconds, Earth transformed from a helpless victim into the most heavily armed world in known space. The first volley of human weapons fired without any warning or dramatic speeches. Railguns accelerated projectiles to incredible speeds and sent them screaming toward alien warships. Particle beams invisible to the naked eye reached across hundreds of thousands of kilometers in milliseconds and began boring holes through alien armor. Quantum torpedoes materialized inside enemy ships and exploded with the force of small stars. Lisa Chang had been waiting in the asteroid belt for 3 hours when the signal finally came to attack. Her ship Warhammer dropped its stealth systems and powered up weapons that could crack moons in half. Around her, 50 other warships appeared from hiding spots among the rocks and debris, where they had been invisible to alien sensors. The Zep fleet suddenly found itself caught between Earth's surface defenses and a second fleet attacking from behind. The aliens had no time to react or change their formation. Lisa's ships fired everything they had in a coordinated barrage that lit up space like a second sun. Zephyrite warships that had seemed so threatening just moments before began exploding in brilliant flashes as their reactors overloaded and their ammunition stores detonated. The perfect formation of the invasion fleet turned into scattered debris and expanding clouds of superheated gas. Tony Brooks led his Marines out of hidden bunkers as alien landing craft touched down in what they thought would be undefended territory. The Zephyrite soldiers who emerged from their ships expected to face frightened civilians, and maybe some local police with basic weapons. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by human soldiers in powered armor, carrying weapons that could punch through their protective suits like they were made of paper. The aliens had never learned to fight in small groups or adapt to unexpected situations. Their military doctrine was based on overwhelming force and intimidation rather than tactics and flexibility. When their initial assault was stopped cold by prepared defenses, they had no backup plans or alternative strategies. They simply kept attacking the same way while human forces picked them apart with precision strikes. Tony watched through his helmet display as alien soldiers tried to take cover behind their landing craft. These creatures were used to enemies that ran away or surrendered when faced with superior firepower. They had no idea how to handle human soldiers who used every piece of terrain for cover and coordinated their attacks through advanced communication systems. The landing zones that were supposed to be safe beachheads became killing fields where alien soldiers died by the hundreds. Kate Reynolds commanded the space battle from her massive battleship Retribution, which had been hiding in Earth's shadow since the alien fleet arrived. Her ship was 3 times larger than the biggest Zephyrite vessel and carried weapons that existed only in the nightmares of enemy fleet commanders. When Kate ordered her gunners to open fire, the results were so devastating that several alien ships simply vaporized without leaving any wreckage behind. The Zephyrite fleet tried to regroup and form defensive formations, but their commanders had never faced an enemy with such advanced weapons and tactics. Human ships moved with coordination that seemed impossible, while alien vessels flew in straight lines that made them easy targets. Every time the Zephyrite tried to concentrate their fire on one human ship, 3 more would appear from different directions, and destroy their formation before they could react. Vexed, stared at his tactical displays in disbelief, as his mighty fleet was torn apart by enemies he had dismissed as primitive animals. Half of his ships were already destroyed or disabled, and the rest were scattered across the solar system trying to escape human pursuit craft. The planet he had planned to conquer in a matter of hours had revealed weapons that surpassed anything his empire possessed. The alien commander tried to send surrender signals, but human forces ignored every attempt at communication. Kate Reynolds had studied the history of Zephyrite conquests, and she knew these creatures showed no mercy to the worlds they invaded. Entire populations had been enslaved or exterminated by this empire, and today, they would receive the same consideration. They had shown their victims. Human fighters swarmed through the wreckage of the alien fleet like angry insects hunting down every survivor they could find. Escape pods and courier ships that tried to flee toward the edge of the solar system were hunted down and destroyed before they could reach hyperspace. Earth's leaders had decided that no Zephyrite would leave the system alive to warn their empire about humanity's true capabilities. Steve Martinez led his Marines through the corridors of a captured alien cruiser, clearing compartments room by room. The Zephyrite soldiers they encountered seemed smaller and more fragile than their propaganda had suggested. Their weapons were designed to stun and capture rather than kill, which made them almost useless against human soldiers, who fought with lethal intent from the very beginning. The alien ship designs were meant to intimidate enemies with sharp angles and weapon-covered hulls, but they had serious flaws that human engineers spotted immediately. The corridors were too narrow for effective defensive fighting, and the life support systems were centralized in ways that made them easy to disable. Steve's troops moved through the ship like they owned it, while alien defenders fell back in confusion and panic. Beth Johnson piloted her fighter through the expanding cloud of debris that had once been the Zephyrite invasion fleet. Her job was to hunt down any alien ships that might be playing dead or trying to hide among the wreckage. Beth felt no guilt about destroying helpless escape pods because she knew these same aliens would have shown no mercy to human children if their invasion had succeeded. The battle that was supposed to last for days was over in less than 6 hours. The Zephyrite invasion fleet had been completely destroyed, with no human ships lost and only minimal damage to Earth's surface defenses. The few alien survivors would spend their remaining lives as test subjects in human research facilities, providing information that would help Earth prepare for future encounters with hostile species. Earth had revealed its true nature to the galaxy, and the message was clear. Humanity would no longer pretend to be weak prey waiting for stronger predators to devour them. 6 hours after the battle began, space around Earth looked like a graveyard of twisted metal and floating debris. Half of the Zephyrite invasion fleet was nothing but expanding clouds of gas and particles, while the other half drifted as broken hulks with their crews dead or dying. The alien formation that had looked so threatening when it first arrived was now scattered wreckage that would take decades to clean up completely. Vexed, huddled in what remained of his command center, and frantically tried to contact any human authority who might accept his surrender. His flagship was missing its entire front section, and life support was failing throughout the ship. Around him, the few surviving members of his crew worked desperately to keep their vessel from breaking apart completely. The proud fleet commander, who had expected an easy conquest, now faced the prospect of dying in the cold vacuum of space. Kate Reynolds read the alien surrender messages from her position on the bridge of retribution, but her expression remained cold and unmoved. She had spent years studying the history of Zephyrite expansion, and she knew exactly what these creatures had done to hundreds of innocent worlds. Entire populations had been enslaved, children had been separated from their families, and whole civilizations had been wiped out to feed the appetite of the Zephyrite Empire. The decision had been made long before the battle started. No member of the invasion fleet would be allowed to return home with information about Earth's true capabilities. Kate's orders were clear, and she felt no hesitation about carrying them out. The Zephyrites had come to Earth, expecting to show no mercy to humanity, and they would receive the same treatment they had planned to give their victims. Steve Martinez kicked down the door of another alien compartment and found three soldiers cowering behind an overturned table. These creatures, who had seemed so fearsome in their propaganda videos, looked pathetic when faced with human soldiers, who knew how to fight in close quarters. Their weapons were designed for stunning large groups of fleeing civilians, not for battling trained Marines who moved with deadly precision through confined spaces. Steve's team had been moving through the captured cruiser for 2 hours, and they had yet to encounter any real resistance from the alien crew. The Zephyrites fought like individuals rather than coordinated units, and their tactics seemed based on intimidating weaker opponents rather than defeating equal adversaries. When faced with humans who refused to be intimidated, the aliens fell apart like their ships were falling apart under concentrated fire. The captured alien vessel contained computers full of information about other worlds the Zephyrites had conquered over the centuries. Steve downloaded everything he could find, while his Marines secured the rest of the ship. The data would provide Earth with intelligence about alien technology, military capabilities, and the locations of slave colonies that might need liberation. Every piece of information was another weapon in humanity's growing arsenal. Beth Johnson continued her hunt through the debris field, looking for any alien ships that might be hiding or trying to repair their damage enough to escape. Her fighter's sensors could detect the heat signatures of working reactors and life support systems, even when ships were trying to play dead among the wreckage. Beth had already destroyed 6 escape pods and 2 courier vessels that were attempting to flee toward the outer system. Each target Beth eliminated was another guarantee that Earth's secret would remain safe for a while longer. The galaxy thought humanity was a primitive species, barely capable of reaching its own moon, and that misconception was one of Earth's most valuable strategic advantages. When other alien empires eventually learned the truth about human capabilities, Earth wanted to choose the time and place for that revelation. Kevin Adams worked frantically in his laboratory aboard the medical ship Nightingale, studying tissue samples from captured Zephyrite prisoners. His research would provide crucial information about alien physiology that could be used to develop more effective weapons and interrogation techniques. Kevin had lost his wife and daughter when alien bombs fell on Detroit during the initial bombardment, and his scientific curiosity was sharpened by a personal desire for revenge. The alien prisoners were kept in specially designed cells that prevented them from communicating with each other or committing suicide before they could be properly questioned. Kevin's preliminary analysis suggested that Zephyrite biology had several interesting weaknesses that could be exploited by human biochemists. Certain frequencies of sound caused severe pain in their nervous systems, while specific chemical compounds could disrupt their ability to think clearly. Kevin felt no guilt about his experiments on living subjects because he knew these same aliens had performed much worse procedures on human prisoners from other worlds. The Zephyrites had a long history of biological experimentation on conquered populations, and Kevin was simply returning the favor with interest. Every scream from his laboratory brought him closer to understanding how to hurt these creatures more efficiently. Nicole Foster commanded the cleanup operations as her ships methodically hunted down every piece of alien wreckage that might contain survivors or useful technology. Her crews worked with the precision of experienced salvage operators, cutting apart alien hulls and sorting through the debris for anything that might be valuable to human scientists and engineers. Nothing would be wasted, and nothing would be allowed to drift away into deep space. Nicole's teams found several alien data cores that had survived the destruction of their ships. These devices contained navigation charts showing the locations of Zephyrite colonies and military bases throughout their section of the galaxy. The information would allow Earth to plan future operations against alien targets while avoiding heavily defended systems until humanity was ready for larger conflicts. The few surviving Zephyrite vessels that remained intact were being towed to secret facilities, where they would be studied and reverse-engineered by human scientists. Every alien technology would be analyzed and improved upon until Earth possessed capabilities that exceeded anything the enemy empire could deploy. The Zephyrites had unknowingly provided humanity with a complete library of advanced alien engineering techniques. Danny Price coordinated the deception operations that would hide evidence of the battle from other alien civilizations. Human ships would plant false wreckage in distant star systems to make it look like the Zephyrite fleet had been destroyed by natural disasters or internal conflicts. The official story would be that the invasion force had suffered reactor failures and navigation errors that caused them to fly into a black hole or unstable star. The solar system's asteroid belts would hide the real evidence for centuries, if necessary. Alien wreckage was being moved to locations where it would be invisible to long-range sensors and indistinguishable from natural space debris. When the Zephyrite Empire eventually sent investigators to find out what happened to their fleet, they would discover nothing but empty space and conflicting sensor readings. Patricia Lane watched the final phase of the operation from her command bunker as human forces finished eliminating the last alien survivors. The battle had been a complete success with no human casualties and minimal damage to Earth's infrastructure. The cities that had been bombed during the initial attack were already being rebuilt with improved defenses and early warning systems. Earth had proven that it could defend itself against any alien threat, but more importantly, it had demonstrated that humanity was ready to take an active role in galactic affairs. The age of hiding behind false weakness was ending, and the time had come for Earth to claim its rightful place among the predator species that ruled the galaxy. The cleanup would take weeks to complete, but the message had already been sent to anyone intelligent enough to understand it. Earth was no longer prey waiting to be devoured by stronger hunters, and any species that threatened humanity would face the same fate as the Zephyrite invasion fleet. 6 months after the Zephyrite invasion fleet vanished without a trace, Ambassador Helen Clark walked into the Great Assembly Hall on Kepler Prime. Representatives from 43 different alien civilizations sat in curved rows around the central speaking platform, their various forms creating a bizarre collection of tentacles, claws, scales, and exotic breathing apparatus. The air hummed with translation devices working in dozens of languages as Helen prepared to address the most powerful gathering in known galactic space. Helen activated the holographic projector at the center of the hall, and three-dimensional images of the battle began playing above the heads of the assembled delegates. The alien representatives watched in stunned silence as the recordings showed Zephyrite warships exploding under the concentrated fire of weapons that seemed to appear from nowhere. The mighty invasion fleet that had conquered hundreds of worlds was reduced to scattered debris in a matter of hours by forces the galaxy had never seen before. The Zephyrite delegate, a creature named Kethfer, who had been sent to explain the disappearance of his empire's fleet, made choking sounds as he watched his people's ships being systematically destroyed by an enemy they had dismissed as harmless prey. The recordings showed human fighters moving with coordination that surpassed the best pilots in Zephyrite service, while human warships demonstrated firepower that exceeded anything in the known galaxy. Helen let the images speak for themselves, as the assembled delegates absorbed the reality of what they were seeing. Earth had not only survived the Zephyrite invasion, but had completely annihilated it without suffering any significant losses. The planet that most galactic civilizations considered a primitive backwater had revealed military capabilities that made the greatest empires look like children playing with toy soldiers. Carl Roberts stepped forward when the recordings ended and began explaining human military doctrine to the shocked alien representatives. He described how Earth had spent centuries studying galactic conflicts through hidden observation posts and captured alien technology. Human scientists had analyzed every weapon system, every tactical doctrine, and every strategic weakness used by major galactic powers, and had designed countermeasures specifically intended to defeat them. Carl's presentation included demonstrations of human technology that left many delegates struggling to understand what they were seeing. Weapons that could fire projectiles at significant fractions of light speed, shields that could bend space and time around defended targets, ships that could travel faster than anything previously thought possible. The technology was decades ahead of even the most advanced galactic civilizations, and it had been developed in complete secrecy while Earth pretended to be isolated and primitive. The Altarian delegate, a tall creature with blue skin and 6 arms, asked how humanity had managed to hide such advanced capabilities from galactic intelligence networks. Carl smiled and explained that Earth had deliberately cultivated an image of weakness and division while building the most sophisticated military force in known space. Human agents had been feeding false information to alien spies for generations, while human scientists worked in hidden facilities to develop weapons that could challenge any threat. Laura Hayes, the president of Earth, addressed the assembly with humanity's new position in galactic politics. She explained that Earth would no longer accept being dismissed as a primitive species or tolerate being threatened by aggressive empires. Any civilization that practiced slavery, genocide, or unprovoked conquest would find itself facing human intervention, regardless of how powerful they thought they were or how many worlds they controlled. Laura's speech sent waves of shock through the assembled delegates as they realized the implications of what she was saying. Humanity was not asking for recognition or requesting membership in existing galactic organizations. They were announcing their intention to impose their own moral standards on civilizations that had operated under different rules for thousands of years. The galaxy had always been dominated by the principle that might made right, but Earth was introducing concepts like justice and proportional response that challenged the existing order. Pete Rogers demonstrated human military technology for the assembled observers using holographic displays that showed weapon systems capable of destroying entire planets. The demonstrations included footage of human ships moving through space at speeds that should have been impossible, and human soldiers fighting with equipment that made elite alien forces look like primitive savages. Every piece of technology displayed was years ahead of anything possessed by the galactic powers. The most shocking revelation came when Pete showed recordings of human bases hidden throughout the galaxy, facilities that had been observing and studying alien civilizations for centuries without being detected. Earth had agents on dozens of worlds monitoring military developments and gathering intelligence about potential threats. Humanity had been preparing for galactic conflict, while their enemies assumed they were isolated and ignorant of interstellar politics. The session reached its climax when Cuthbert, speaking for the Zephyrite Dominion, formally surrendered his empire to humanity, rather than face the complete destruction that had befallen their invasion fleet. His words sent shockwaves through the assembly as delegates realized that one of the galaxy's most feared military powers was capitulating to a species they had never considered a serious threat. Just months before, the surrender agreement that Laura presented to the assembly went far beyond anything the galaxy had seen before. The Zephyrite Empire would be completely dismantled with their slave worlds liberated and their military forces disbanded. Their territory would be placed under human administration, and their leaders would face trial for crimes against the populations they had conquered. It was unconditional surrender on a scale that redefined what galactic conquest meant. Several delegates attempted to protest the severity of humanity's demands, but Helen cut them off with recordings of Zephyrite atrocities on conquered worlds. The images showed alien soldiers separating families, children being loaded onto slave ships, and entire cities being destroyed for no military purpose. She reminded the assembly that these same creatures had planned to do identical things to Earth's population, and that mercy was a luxury humanity could not afford when dealing with unrepentant, genocidal empires. The Vrixen delegate, whose species had been fighting the Zephyrite for decades, stood up and formally requested human assistance in liberating their conquered colonies. This simple request opened the floodgates as dozens of other species began asking for Earth's help against various oppressive empires and aggressive neighbors. Within hours, humanity had received more requests for military intervention than they could handle even with their advanced capabilities. Laura addressed these requests by announcing the formation of the Terran Protection Corps, a military organization dedicated to defending worlds that could not protect themselves against larger, predatory civilizations. Membership would be voluntary, but nations that joined would receive human military protection and access to advanced defensive technologies. The galaxy was being offered a choice between the old system of conquest and exploitation or a new order, based on mutual defense and cooperative development. As the assembly session concluded, many species began reconsidering their own policies toward weaker civilizations and aggressive expansion. The hegemony of Talar announced they were abandoning their planned invasion of the Kepler colonies, while the Dominion of Zareth began negotiating reparations with worlds they had previously attacked. Earth had changed the fundamental rules of galactic politics, and every civilization would need to adapt to survive in this new environment. The stars themselves seemed different as delegates filed out of the assembly hall. The galaxy was no longer the domain of ancient empires and established hierarchies where strength automatically granted the right to dominate weaker species. Earth had introduced the revolutionary concept that true strength came from protecting others rather than exploiting them, and the age of casual conquest was ending forever. Humanity had revealed its true nature as the ultimate apex predator. But unlike the tyrants that had ruled the galaxy before them, humans used their power to hunt other predators rather than preying on the helpless. The galaxy would learn to respect the species that wore human faces and carried the promise that no world would ever again stand alone against tyranny.